Forget everything you thought you knew about the noble gods of Olympus. If your only exposure to Greek mythology was through sanitized school textbooks or animated movies, you've been sold a lie. The real Mount Olympus wasn't a shining beacon of justice. It was more like a high-stakes, supernatural version of a psychological thriller mixed with a slasher film. Imagine a world where the beings you worship aren't just powerful. They are completely unhinged. They don't have a moral compass. They have appetites. They are human impulses like lust, rage, and jealousy, magnified by the power to level cities and rewrite the laws of physics. Today, we are tearing back the veil on the dark side of the ancient world. We're diving into the stories the history books are too scared to tell, the ones filled with cosmic horror, divine gaslighting, and the sheer terror of being immortal in a world of bored, sociopathic deities. Before we descend into this madness, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a deep dive into the darkest corners of history. And if you're ready to see the gods for who they really were, drop a like on this video right now. Let's get into it. The cosmic predator, Zeus, and the art of the trap. To understand the terror of the Greek world, you have to start at the top with Zeus, or as the Romans called him, Jupiter. In most versions of these stories, he's the wise king. But if you look at the actual accounts, he's less of a king and more of a shape-shifting predator who viewed the world as his personal hunting ground. The ancient authors tell us that Zeus didn't just walk up to women. He used his godhood to bypass consent in the most creative and terrifying ways possible. Why? Because the Greeks believed that seeing a god's true form was like staring directly into a nuclear blast. It would literally incinerate a mortal. So, Zeus became a master of the long con. Take the story of the princess Europa. She was just a girl walking on a beach, enjoying the breeze, when she saw a magnificent white bull grazing peacefully in the grass. It looked gentle, almost divine. But the moment she climbed onto its back, the trap snapped shut. The bull didn't just run. It charged into the sea, dragging her across the waves to the island of Crete, where he revealed his true, terrifying nature. Imagine the psychological trauma of realizing that the animal you trusted was actually the king of the universe in a costume. But Zeus didn't stop at animals. His deceptions became increasingly bizarre and invasive. For a woman named Leda, he became a swan. For Danae, who had been locked in a bronze underground chamber by her father to prevent a prophecy, Zeus found a way to leak through the ceiling as a shower of literal gold. From that mystical union, the hero Perseus was born. The most calculated move, however, was his pursuit of Alcmene. He didn't just change into an animal. He stole the identity of her husband, Amphitryon. He waited until the husband was at war, then walked into her home wearing his face. To make the night last longer, Zeus literally stopped the sun, freezing time for 3 days just to satisfy his whim. The result was the birth of Hercules, a hero whose very name, Glory of Hera, was a cruel, sarcastic jab at Zeus's legitimate wife. The victim and the wise goddess, the Medusa Tragedy. We often think of Medusa as the ultimate monster, the snake-haired Gorgon whose gaze turns men to stone. But the real story, as told by the Roman poet Ovid, is one of the most disgusting examples of victim-blaming in human history. Long before she was a monster, Medusa was a beautiful mortal woman and a priestess in the temple of Athena. She had taken a vow of chastity, a sacred promise to her goddess. But her beauty caught the eye of Poseidon, the god of the sea and Zeus's brother. Poseidon wasn't just the god of water. He was known for a wild temper that couldn't be tamed. When Poseidon wanted Medusa, he didn't care about her vows or the sanctity of the temple. He forced himself upon her right there, in the holy sanctuary of Athena. In any sane world, the god would be punished. But in the Greek world, the gods were the law. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, wasn't angry at Poseidon for the assault. She was angry at Medusa for defiling her floor. Instead of striking down the rapist, Athena unleashed her fury on the victim. She transformed Medusa's beautiful hair into a writhing nest of venomous snakes and turned her eyes into weapons of death. Medusa became an outcast, a woman so dangerous that even a glance of compassion from a stranger would turn them into a statue. She was left to rot in isolation, waiting for the inevitable day when a hero would come to finish the job. That hero was Perseus, the son of Zeus. Using a reflective shield to avoid looking at her, he decapitated the woman who had already lost everything. And the final insult? Athena took that severed head, the head of the woman she had cursed, and mounted it on her own shield as a trophy. It's a chilling reminder. In the eyes of the gods, mortals are just collateral damage in their games of ego and honor. This is just the beginning of the nightmare. I have much more to tell you about the madness of Dionysus, the manufactured weapon that was Pandora, and the secret, blood-soaked rituals that made even the Greeks tremble. If you think Dionysus, or Bacchus to the Romans, is just some jolly, chubby guy holding a cluster of grapes, you couldn't be more wrong. In the ancient world, he was the god of the breakdown, the moment when civilization collapses and the animal takes over. He represented the thin, fragile line between a functioning society and total, bloody chaos. His very existence began in a house of fire and lies. Zeus, in his endless pursuit of mortal women, fell for the Theban princess Semele. But Hera, Zeus's wife, was a master of psychological warfare. She didn't just kill Semele, she convinced the girl to commit suicide by God. Disguised as an old nurse, Hera planted a seed of doubt. If he really loves you, why does he hide his true face? Zeus, bound by a sacred oath, was forced to show Semele his full, divine glory. The lightning, the thunder, the raw power of a star. A mortal body cannot survive that. Semele was incinerated instantly, but Zeus reached into her burning womb, cut out the 6-month-old fetus, and, in one of the strangest biological surgeries in myth, sewed the unborn baby into his own thigh. 3 months later, Dionysus was twice born from the leg of the king of the gods. This trauma defined his cult. Dionysus didn't want prayers. He wanted ecstasy, literally, to stand outside oneself. His followers, the Maenads, or Maenads, would retreat into the mountains, fueled by wine and hallucinogenic substances, entering a state of religious madness. In this divine frenzy, these women were said to possess superhuman strength, capable of tearing living animals, and sometimes people, apart with their bare hands. The most chilling example is the fate of King Pentheus. He tried to ban the cult of Dionysus, seeing it as a threat to law and order. In retaliation, the god didn't just kill him, he broke the minds of the women in Pentheus's own family. He drove the king's mother, Agave, into such a deep delusion that she mistook her own son for a wild lion. She tore him limb from limb and carried his severed head back into the city as a trophy of her hunt. The Romans were so terrified of the social collapse associated with these bacchanalia that in 186 BC, the Senate passed a decree banning the rituals across the empire and executing thousands of cult members. Dionysus was a reminder that beneath our clothes and our laws, there is a monster waiting for a drink, Pandora, the divine biological weapon. We've all heard of Pandora's box, but the original myth isn't a fairy tale about curiosity. It's a story about a manufactured trap. According to the Greeks, the first woman wasn't a partner, she was a punishment. It all started with Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. To Zeus, fire was more than warmth. It was the key to technology and civilization. If humans had fire, they might eventually stop needing the gods. Zeus's revenge on Prometheus was legendary, chaining him to a rock where an eagle ate his liver every single day. But for the rest of humanity, he wanted something more subtle. He wanted a beautiful evil. He ordered Hephaestus to mold the first woman out of clay, and every god gave her a gift that was actually a weapon. Aphrodite gave her beauty to provoke desire. Athena gave her skills, but Hermes gave her the gift of lies and a deceptive heart. They named her Pandora, the one with all the gifts, and sent her to Earth with a sealed vessel. Zeus knew exactly what would happen. He gave the vessel to Pandora with a strict order never to open it, while simultaneously hardwiring her with an irresistible curiosity. He then sent her to Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. While Prometheus was forethought, Epimetheus was afterthought. He didn't see the trap until it had already sprung. Despite his brother's warnings never to accept a gift from Zeus, Epimetheus was so blinded by Pandora's beauty that he took her as his wife. The moment Pandora opened that jar, the golden age of humanity ended. Before this, humans didn't know disease, they didn't age, and they died peacefully as if falling asleep. Out of the jar flew every horror imaginable: war, famine, plague, and madness. The most cynical part? At the very bottom of the jar was hope. Many people think this was a mercy, but ancient authors like Hesiod saw it as the final cruelty. Hope was just the illusion that the suffering might one day end, keeping humans alive just long enough to endure more pain. This myth was used for centuries to justify a deeply patriarchal society, framing women as the divine mistake responsible for all human misery. The Olympic scandal, love, war, and the invisible net. Even the lighter stories on Olympus have a streak of cruelty. Take the famous affair between Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and Ares, the god of war. Aphrodite was married to Hephaestus, the god of fire and blacksmithing. Hephaestus was the outsider of the gods. He was physically disabled and considered unattractive, but he was the most brilliant engineer in the universe. Their marriage wasn't based on love. It was a political move by Zeus to prevent the other gods from fighting over her. But Aphrodite wanted passion, and she found it in Ares. Where her husband was about slow, careful creation, Ares was about raw, destructive power. They thought they were being clever, but they forgot one thing. Helios, the sun, sees everything. When Helios told Hephaestus about the affair, the blacksmith didn't yell or throw a tantrum. He went to his forge. He created a net made of adamant, a metal stronger than diamond and thinner than a spider's silk. He rigged it over his own bed. The next time the lovers met, the net snapped shut, binding them together in the most compromising position imaginable. Instead of dealing with it privately, Hephaestus invited all the gods of Olympus to come and laugh at them. It was divine public shaming. The male gods stood around the bed, cracking jokes. Hermes even joked that he'd happily be trapped in 3 times as many chains if it meant being that close to Aphrodite while the world watched. The story ends not with an apology, but with a return to the status quo. After being released, Aphrodite went to Cyprus to renew her beauty, and Ares went back to his wars. From their union came children like Eros, desire, and Harmonia, harmony. A reminder that from the collision of love and war, both beauty and destruction are born. Wait, we're just getting to the truly dark stuff. Up next, the Golden Boy. Apollo, and his trail of bodies, the horrifying cruelty of the virgin goddess Artemis, and the psychological torture Hera inflicted on her husband's victims. If you're enjoying this descent into the real Greek myths, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep bringing these hidden histories to light. If Zeus was the predator and Dionysus was the madness, then Apollo was the ego. Often portrayed as the most civilized of the gods, the lord of music, poetry, and light. Apollo's grace was a thin mask for a sadistic streak that rivaled the worst of his siblings. He didn't just want to be worshipped. He wanted to be the only thing that mattered. And if you bruised his vanity, he wouldn't just kill you. He would erase your soul. Take the story of Daphne, the daughter of a river god. Apollo didn't fall in love with her in any human sense. He decided he owned her. He chased her through the wilderness like a predator tracking a deer. Imagine the terror of being hunted by a being that moves like light. When she finally begged her father for a way out, he turned her into a laurel tree to save her from Apollo's grasp. But instead of feeling remorse, Apollo claimed her even in her transformed state, declaring the laurel as his sacred tree and making its leaves the symbol of victory. He essentially turned her trauma into a marketing campaign for his own glory. But his treatment of Cassandra, the Trojan princess, was far more insidious. He offered her the gift of prophecy in exchange for her body. When she took the gift but refused to sleep with him, Apollo didn't take the power back. Instead, he cursed her so that her prophecies would always be true, but no one would ever believe her. This is the ultimate form of psychological gaslighting. She saw the fall of her city, the death of her family, and her own murder. But whenever she screamed a warning, people just laughed and called her crazy. If you think that's dark, wait until you hear about the satyr Marsyas. Marsyas was a brilliant musician who challenged Apollo to a contest, and the winner got to do anything they wanted to the loser. When Apollo realized Marsyas's music was just as beautiful as his own, he cheated by demanding they play their instruments upside down, something possible on a lyre but impossible on a flute. After winning, Apollo didn't just kill Marsyas, he skinned him alive while he was still conscious. He hung the satyr's skin in a cave as a warning. Never, ever be better than a god. Artemis, the pure executioner. While her brother Apollo was busy flaying musicians, Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt, was proving that purity in the ancient world often meant zero mercy. She was the patron of the wilderness, and she guarded her boundaries with a level of violence that makes modern horror movies look tame. The hunter Actaeon found this out the hard way. By some accounts, he was just a man who got lost and accidentally saw Artemis bathing in a forest pool. For the crime of seeing a goddess's skin, Artemis didn't just strike him blind. She transformed him into a stag, a deer, and then set his own hunting dogs on him. He retained his human mind as his loyal pets tore him limb from limb, unable to scream for help. Then there was Niobe, a queen who made the mistake of bragging about her 14 children. She suggested she was more successful than Artemis's mother, Leto, who only had 2. In a display of divine proportionality, Artemis and Apollo descended on the city and methodically executed all 14 of Niobe's children with their bows. Artemis didn't stop until every single daughter was dead, even as Niobe clutched the youngest to her chest, begging for a single life to be spared. Niobe was so broken by the grief that she literally turned into a stone that wept forever. Hera, the queen of systematic torture. If Zeus was the spark of the fire, Hera was the slow-moving lava that buried everyone in its path. As the goddess of marriage, she didn't just hate her husband's mistresses, She viewed them as glitches in the cosmic order that needed to be erased with extreme prejudice. Her treatment of Io is perhaps her masterpiece of cruelty. After Zeus turned Io into a cow to hide her, Hera claimed the animal and put it under the watch of Argus, a giant with 100 eyes who never slept. Even after Zeus managed to get Argus killed, Hera didn't stop. She sent a gadfly to sting Io constantly, driving her into a madness of pain and forcing her to run across entire continents without a moment's rest. Io spent years as a beast, hunted by an insect, just because a god found her attractive. Hera's wrath even extended to the unborn. When Leto was pregnant with Apollo and Artemis, Hera forbade any land on earth to let the woman give birth. Leto wandered in labor for 9 days, denied a place to sit or rest, until she found a floating island that technically wasn't land. Even then, Hera kidnapped the goddess of childbirth to make the labor as agonizing as possible. But her most famous victim was Hercules. She didn't just try to kill him. She waited until he was a happy man with a family, and then struck him with a sudden, magical insanity. In that state of madness, Hercules murdered his own wife and children. The 12 labors weren't just a heroic quest. They were a desperate attempt at penance for a crime Hera forced him to commit. This is part 4 of 4, the final chapter of our descent into the dark side of Greek mythology. The Mirror of Madness, why the Greeks built monsters. We've traveled through the predatory deceptions of Zeus, the systematic victim-blaming of Medusa, the bloody frenzies of Dionysus, and the cruel psychological games of Apollo and Hera. After seeing all this, you have to ask yourself, why? Why would one of the most advanced civilizations in human history, the people who gave us democracy, logic, and the foundations of science, create a religion populated by such terrifying, amoral beings? The truth is, the Greeks didn't want their gods to be role models. They wanted them to be a mirror. In modern culture, we often try to make our heroes perfect. We want them to be symbols of pure justice. But the ancient Greeks were far more honest about the reality of the world. They understood that the universe is often chaotic, unfair, and ruled by forces that don't care about your feelings. The gods of Olympus were never meant to be good. They were the personification of human passions, lust, rage, jealousy, and ego, magnified to an absolute power. Zeus wasn't just a king. He was the embodiment of unchecked male libido and the corruption that comes with total authority. Hera was a warning of how systemic jealousy and betrayal can turn a victim into a terrifying tyrant. Apollo proved that even the most civilized and enlightened individuals are capable of staggering cruelty when their ego is bruised. Artemis represented the danger of fanatical purity and the refusal to ever compromise. Aphrodite served as a constant reminder that raw passion usually triumphs over reason and morality. The divine warning, power without a pulse. The Greeks lived in a world where a sudden plague or a violent storm could wipe out a family in a single day. By making their gods flawed and impulsive, they were explaining a harsh reality. Sometimes, bad things happen to good people because the powers that be are simply bored or angry. Their stories weren't just entertainment. They were a psychological survival guide. They served as a brutal warning about what happens when you have unlimited power without a single moral boundary. The gods were essentially humans without brakes. By watching the disasters the gods caused, the Greeks learned the importance of sophrosyne, the virtue of self-control and moderation. If even the gods couldn't handle their impulses, what hope did a mere mortal have if they didn't set limits for themselves? The Great Sanitization, reclaiming the truth. The version of Greek mythology we see in movies today is a sanitized theme park version of the original. Modern retellings often turn the gods into good guys or hide the most uncomfortable stories to make them more politically correct. But when we strip away the blood and the non-PC elements, we lose the very thing that makes these myths eternal: their psychological truth. The ancient myths didn't try to sugarcoat the human condition. They showed that beauty can be a weapon of destruction, that justice doesn't always triumph, and that power inevitably corrupts. This raw honesty is exactly why these stories have survived for thousands of years and continue to inspire writers and directors today. They are a reminder that the monsters we fear aren't just in the shadows. They are the parts of ourselves we haven't learned to control yet. Mount Olympus wasn't a place of light. It was a warning written in the stars. And perhaps the greatest lesson the Greeks left us is this: don't strive to be like the gods. Strive to be better than them. If you've made it through all 4 parts of this journey, you now know the dark secrets the gods tried to hide. But the shadows of history go much deeper than just the Greeks. Did this change how you see your favorite heroes? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We have more unfiltered history coming your way. Stories of forgotten empires, dark rituals, and the truths that the textbooks are still too afraid to print. Hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next vault of history is opened. Thank you for watching, and remember, keep questioning the stories you've been told. Would you like me to research more dark myths from other cultures, such as Norse or Egyptian mythology, to continue this series?